Okay, everybody. So we're going to make a robot. We're going to start with small pieces. We are going to use those small pieces use in edit mode. We're going to mirror them and we're going to slowly build up our shape of our robot one step at a time. Ultimately, we're going to refine that shape until it looks more and more realistic. But today we're just going to start with our basic outline using all blocks. You guys can use cylinders if you want to. But I'm going to do all blocks, and you guys can follow me exactly, or you can modify it. But let's get started. I got my cube. I'm going to go into edit mode. You want to do most of this in edit mode because we're going to do this. We're going to have a unique workflow this time. All right, so edit mode. You can also hit tab. And first I'm going to move this over. So the reason you don't want to do this in object mode is because you'll see a little orange dot. And if I move that, you can see it even better. There's a little orange dot there. That's called our origin. And when we do our mirror, we're going to mirror it across that origin. So I'm going to add my modifier, mirror. And it looks like I did in the wrong direction, so I'm just going to change my axis. And now in order to select these, let me turn on the tool here. You can basically hit L. So when you're in edit mode, and you have multiple objects, or if you just want to select the whole thing, you just hit L. So I clicked that, L, and if I had multiples, let me just demonstrate. If you click L, it'll keep adding in more objects. If you want to get rid of all those, you can just select something and it'll get rid of it, or you can hit A twice. Looks like I clicked it 3 times, but A twice will unselect all. And so let me show you again. L to select. And if you keep hitting select L on other things to select other things, you can keep adding selections. So A to unselect, L to select. You can also have multiple selection modes on. So while some of you may like face select and others may like edge select, and I use them whenever I need them, you can actually hold shift and you can select multiples. So right now I have edge and face. So I got faces or I got edges. That can be useful sometimes. Other times that can mess you up a little bit. And if you're getting messed up, like you're trying to select something that's going to the wrong type of thing, you just unselect one of them. And it goes right back to what you're used to. Alright, so I may use that as I do this. It's a nice little tool. But first I'm going to delete this cube. And I'm going to start making the feet. So I'm just going to move this face down. And I'm locking it in by hitting my middle mouse button. But you can also hit X, Y, or Z on the keyboard after you move it, and that will also lock it in. Alright, so I'm hitting G, moving where I want it to, and in order to lock it in, I'm hitting my middle mouse button once. Nice. So I got my feet. If I want to move them in, I can select it and just hit G, and you can see they move at the same time, which is really cool. Alright, I'm going to do the back part, the calf sort of part. So I'm going to Shift D. If you didn't notice, I hit L to select it first. And I'm going to make this one a little bit skinnier. I'm going to say scale only in the Y direction, or X depending on how you have it oriented. So I just click that on the keyboard, and I'm going to rotate it. Now, it rotates based on your camera position, so I'm going to lock that one in too. Not that one, but Y. Cool. And I'm going to duplicate that, so I got to get two of them. And then I'm going to duplicate both of these. I'm going to hit L to select another one, and Shift D. I hit the middle mouse button to lock it, and rotate. And I hit Y on the keyboard. And I'm just kind of figuring out how I want this to go together. Alright, so in the future I might add some joints here, some kind of way that will actuate together. Maybe some kind of plate on the inside. But for now, this is fine because it just helps me get that idea out. Helps me to basically think of the big picture first and then slowly work down. Alright, I'm going to work on my body. Now, I kind of have an idea what this is going to look like because I've done it several times. So let me show you what I did recently. So it's kind of a lifting machine. These are not guns. These are like forklift arms to lift things. And I did the arms in the T-pose because after doing this several times, I found that it's much easier in a T-pose. Okay. So I'm going to make that body now. I want to... Basically, I can either just duplicate this and move it in place, or I can add a new cube. If I did add a new cube, because it's in the center, it's going to have some overlapping faces. And I'm going to try to avoid that. So I'm going to just use his foot. And I'm going to duplicate that. Now, notice how it will actually overlap a little bit. And that's not ideal. So I'm going to first, I'm going to try to select the inside face. I'm going to delete that. So it's open on the inside. And if you don't happen to do that right now, it's not the end of the world. Especially if you end up remaking the body later. But I'm going to click on clipping on my mirror. So now when I move these parts together, it's going to literally only hit in the center. That's good. Now I can move this up. And another nice benefit of having it have the clipping on your mirror is once it touches together, it sticks together, which sometimes is good. Other times it's a little bit of annoyance. But in this case, it works. I'm going to just modify this to be a little bit bigger. You guys might decide to make it taller or shorter. Completely up to you. I actually think I might want to move the whole thing down a little bit. So I'm going to hit L and then G. I always hit G when I move or grab. You can also, if you wanted to, use this move tool, gizmo they call it, and that'll give you the old cursor if you're used to that from the old version. Alright, otherwise I'm just going to leave it on regular selection mode. Alright, so just to recap before we go any further, we made a cube, we moved it over, we turned on mirror, and then we learned how to select with L, deselect with A twice, and how to rotate and duplicate. Alright, so duplicate, to show you again, is going to be L to select, and then Shift D, and then move it into place. So right now I'm working on the head. I'm just being picky, deciding where to put it, how big it should be. So that's looking pretty good at the moment. I think I'm going to move my legs too. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to say L. Oh, I'm going to unselect all first, and then L, and select all these parts, and I'm going to move it in a little bit so that one part of the leg is on the inside and the other one is still out there. Doesn't really matter that much, but that's part of the process, figuring out what you want. Alright, now his head's floating, so I'm going to make a neck for him. I'm going to L to select something, and I'm going to hit, not G, I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate it, and kind of put it where I think it's good. Scale it down a little. Or scale in this direction. Yeah. Need some little bit more substance. Cool. And I'm going to duplicate it. And then rotate it around. Now when you rotate, it's going to rotate based on your camera. So wherever your camera is going to be the exact angle. And it takes a little bit of practice to get used to that. But after some practice, you can get pretty good at it. Alright, so I'm just putting some areas that, if this were a robot, I would put some maybe hydraulics. As a matter of fact, I did this robot once, and I don't have it open. Basically, I found some robot head references. And this is a good reference. And you can see the hydraulics on there. So we're not putting a lot of detail, but I'm just kind of imagining at this point what I think it should, how it should work at least. Alright, so I'm going to save this image, and that'll drop it down here. And what I like to do is I like to take that and drop it into Blender. I'm just going to quickly change this to image editor, and I'm going to actually make 2. And if you don't manage to do that, that's not a big deal. You can always switch between windows or something. Alright, and then I can really just drag it from where it downloaded at the bottom of that into my Blender. You can't just copy and paste it, you have to actually download it first. But it works pretty good. And if you want to keep it in your file, you can say File, External Data, and you can say Automatically Pack into Blend. And now when you save this, which I should probably do, now that image will be saved in with the blend file. And this is really good when you're using textures and stuff too, it's just good idea generally to save this, click automatically package blend, and then save it. And then everything you use in it will always be in your file. The downside of that is it makes your files huge. So if your internet connection is slow, that's something to consider. But it works for me, especially if I'm working locally. Alright, and this is a small file. It's not like an 8K texture or anything. So, I'm just thinking about some more ways I can add detail. I kind of think I want a little bit more of a neck. So I'm going to duplicate that. Whoa, it's huge. So I'm going to just scale that in. Scaled it, moved it. That'll work for now. Remember, I don't want too much detail, so might be getting a little bit ahead of myself. Alright, I'm going to add some more shape to the body and the head. So I'm zooming in, and I'm going to start with this back edge. If you didn't notice, I already have the edge and the face select on, but you can switch between them if you like. The shortcuts are the 1, 2, and 3 buttons, keys. So I got that selected. I'm going to hit Control B. And this is what's called a destructive bevel. The bevel cuts corners, and it's destructive because it doesn't add a modifier in your modifier list, which is, it's useful, especially if you're getting ideas out of your head, but you can't go back later and modify it or edit it like you could if you did it in your modifier list. So there's bevel here, which we actually will use, but at this point, when your limit method is none, it'll put a bevel on everything, and I think it doesn't really look good. I mean, you can get a really small bevel, and it actually will look okay, and then later you can go back because it's in this modifier stack, but I'm going to just avoid that for now. Another thing in the future is if you're using this bevel, you can actually change it to weight, and you can put a bevel weight on each one, and then you can set that separately for all of them. Okay, so that's the difference between destructive and non-destructive. To do destructive, it was Control B. Alright, and I'm just going to pull this out a little bit to give it more of an organic feel. We'll figure out what we want to do with that later. And the head's going to be really important because in order for people to connect to robots, it has to have a realistic, a human-like head to it. You'll notice if you look at any of the other robot heads that they all have eyes, they almost have a mouth, ears. So we want to get a robot that approximates something human. Might not have a mouth, but this guy has eyes and ears. So instead of this cube, we're going to give this some life by doing a couple of loop cuts, which is Control R. You can see that in the lower right when I do it. And I'm going to say right about here. And I'm going to do one loop cut right about here. And we might change these and move them around later. But ultimately, it's going to allow us to give them kind of a jaw. Alright, and I'm going to get rid of some of the blockiness just by moving in some points. Or some edges, I guess, technically. Alright, so I'm changing the point mode, and I'm just kind of giving it a little bit of a human look by moving some stuff inwards. And outwards in this case. And this part might be different according to your taste. You might want to change this slightly. Just approximating what I like. Alright, back of his head's really blocky still. Blockhead. Just slowly moving the stuff in, giving it a little bit of realistic shape to it. And you know what? I think his head's a little too small. So I'm going to hit L to select the whole thing. And scale it up to your liking. I'm going to move it up a little bit. Alright, also I'm going to move all his neck pieces up. Yeah, that's more like it. Cool. So that's starting to look pretty good. May not be perfect, and that's the whole idea. You refine it slowly, and you will be amazed because eventually you'll look back and you'll be like, wow, this is starting to come together. Alright, so I got the head. I'm going to do some kind of forklift thing, so it's gonna be like a heavy lifting machine. And honestly, I might want to bevel this too. Control B. But still, I don't know. That works. Alright, I'm going to do that forklift thing. So I'm going to... Actually, I'm going to just use the feet. Select and duplicate. And I'm going to scale this down a little bit. A lot of bit, I don't know. So, I can also duplicate again and rotate. Just using these basic shapes to approximate what we're going for. That's going to be the main part. And I want this to kind of telescope. So, I'm going to L to select and Shift D to duplicate. I'm going to scale this down a little bit so it has kind of a telescoping look. And then I'm going to just move this, make this a lot longer. So I imagine it kind of telescoping, but maybe just moving back. It's going to be an awesome robot, so it can do stuff like that. Alright, so I'm going to do it one more time. Doing Shift D, scaling it down a little bit, and it actually disappeared, so maybe I'll move it first. Scale it down a little bit. I'm actually going to scale this down in the X direction, because, no, that's the Z direction, because I want it to be able to get under things so we can lift them. Nice. Some of you may be thinking that looks like a gun. It's not a gun. That is a forklift lifting mechanism. All right. Remember, you guys are willing to, you are able to change these and make them slightly different if you'd like. But I'm gonna, I guess, move on to the arms. And I actually made this robot several times, and the first times I made the robot's arms in a cool pose. It was kind of difficult because I was trying to match angles a lot. This time I'm going to use a T pose, which some of you may be familiar with. T poses are what they use for character design. So there's some weird ones in here, but it's essentially how they design their characters, and then they pose them into position later. One benefit that we're going to have is it's going to save a lot of time just lining things up. So let's get started with the arm. I'm going to pull up a robot arm, and so these are industrial robot arms, and the one I was really looking at as a reference is this one because it's so simple. So, like I did last time, I'm going to save image as and save. And then I can grab it from here and drop it right into Blender. And I just like having it at the bottom there. Alright. So I'm just going to copy the leg just because it's a basic rectangular thing. Scale it in whatever direction I need. I'm going to move it up a little. That works. And then I'm going to duplicate and scale, move. So this is going to be the basic spot that things are going to connect to. And I'm going to duplicate that again, scale it again. And if it's not perfect, it's okay. But the idea is here, we're going to bring this out, and that's going to be the tricep area. And oops, Shift D. And then for this other part, I'm going to literally copy this. In this case, I'm going to make it a little bit thinner. Okay, L and L. And then, actually, I'm going to leave that there and then rotate it. I'm going to type 180. And that's going to be useful because now I can basically, that'll rotate along this way, and as I duplicate this, should have all the movement that our elbows have. You got rotate and bend. If you can imagine, you can basically, I didn't lock it into an axis, but you can imagine how that will work. You can bend it there, then you can rotate it that way. All right. So for the hand, the first time I did the hand, I did it pretty detailed. This time we're going to make it simple, and we can add the detail in later. So I'm going to duplicate this section, and that's where the hand's going to be. Actually, maybe it's a good idea to duplicate all of this. Whoa, that was weird. It just closed. All right, and that's the end result right here. It duplicated that whole inside part, and then I just added these little grabbers on them, which will add detail later. Pretty happy that I did this twice, because that last one just completely winked out of existence on my computer. Alright, so don't forget to save this. I'm going to automatically pack into blend file, even though I lost my images. And I'm going to say save. And put your initials in there. It's always a good idea. Cool. All right. That should be all we need this week. Next week, we're going to add some more detail. I'm also going to be working on a fusion tutorial. Remember, you can make this slightly different. You can add things. You can make it very different if you'd like to. Or you can follow me exactly. All right, so it's another lesson. I will talk to you later.